carbs now are going to make a comeback. Because most people think that carbs make them fat. And of course, we could talk here in a minute when we talk about adherence and stuff. I could talk a little bit more about, I have like 4 or 5 real life examples confirming 110% why carbs do not make you fat. You can set aside the research and just look at the stories that I tell you, and it will shock you. So the answer is that this is what most people don't realize, especially bodybuilders who are inexperienced. Old school bodybuilders know this. The Lee Haneys of the world got shredded on 65% carbs, 30%, or 60% carbs, 30% protein, 10% fat. They got shredded for years. They're the like most lean muscular athletes in the world. And they've always put fats in the basement and had carbs sky high and always had moderate protein because they don't need to have sky high protein because of all the carbs in their diet being so muscle sparing.
That was always the approach that I took. I started competing in 2008 and competed all the way through till late 2016. So about an 8-9 year window there. And it was always, we start very high carb, super low fat. And then by the end of the cut, whether it was 12, 16, 20 weeks long, carbs are dropping, right? Because you're super focused on getting super shredded. The protein would then skyrocket, to 1.5, 2 grams per body weight. And fat stayed low the entire time. Like it was always low fat. The fat conversation really came into play, I think, in what I've seen around the mid 2000 teens, right? 15, 16, a lot of keto stuff. And then obviously, when carnivore caught a wave. And I think the problem in those spaces, it just becomes so dogmatic. People shape their identities around these diets. And that's always been the conversation I try to bring here is like, all of these can work. But as you already said once, it's going to be the compliance is going to be the main driver of all of this. I'd love to get into some of the case studies and stories that you've witnessed. And I'll tee it up with, I've done 3 7-day windows of sugar fasting first. So I followed the Mark Bell, Smelly Belly protocol. Like he was the first introduction I heard about it. Somebody sent it to me 3 months ago. And at first take, I pushed it off. I said, that's just Mark being Mark. This dude is crazy. He's going to try anything. And then I started to really look into it. I was like, there's something here. So I tried it the first time, the sugar fast. So that was like Mark's 2.5 days of only sugar, then a huge carb backload on day 3. Then you do 2.5 more days of only sugar, then a huge protein backload at the end of the 3rd day. Once again, one thing I did notice, and you mentioned it there, was I noticed a decrease by day 2 in my strength in the gym and my ability to push it. The second time around, I did what he would call the sugar diet, which was fruit, sugar throughout the day, huge protein meal with some starchy carbs at night. That second week, I actually had a greater fat loss. Strength stayed up. But one thing that shocked me, Shaun, and I'm curious if you know what's driving this, is my quality of sleep drastically went up. Like I was sleeping like a baby, 8+ hours of sleep, tracked it on the Aura. I was cracking 93s, 94s, sleep efficiency every single night. And then my energy throughout the day was like there were no mid-afternoon crashes. In my cardio capacity. So I do a 45-minute ruck, and I have since I started doing 75 hard back in December. I cut like a minute off of my mile ruck time just with this small, simple change.
You don't even know you're doing it. Yeah, you don't even know what's happening. You just do it automatically because you have more energy.
I would just see it at the end of the tracker. I'm like, oh my God, I went a minute faster here. So what was driving maybe those 2 changes there with both the sleep quality and just the cardiovascular increase? And then talk to us about some of the successes that you've seen with various types of people.
Well, the first thing that happens is you're talking about the third mechanism with the energy, right? The third mechanism is your body, when your liver is dosed with sugar like this. And I think we need to make this important. We're not talking about candy bars and stuff like that. We're not just talking about gummies and Starburst either, right? We're talking about fruit juices, maple syrup, honey, raw cane sugar. People are afraid of it, but we just extract it from sugar cane and sugar beets, just like we extract olive oil from olives. It's not much different, guys, right? So it's isolating it and understanding that. And then, you mentioned the energy going up. Well, when you give your body all these carbs and your liver just starts firing and burning it off through these mechanisms, you increase ATP production. So what ends up happening is when you isolate the sugar without the protein and the fat, your liver starts producing more ATP through mitochondrial uncoupling, okay? And this is going to temporarily help you rip through more stored body fat. And so what's happening with the sleep quality, because I noticed the same thing, and some people have the opposite effect. And I think it depends on your starting point and the current microbiome of your gut as well, because your body can take some time to adjust to the fruit, especially if you're moving from a carnivore or keto type of diet, which a lot of overweight, obese people who are in stall city, as Cole Robinson would call it, right? They're stuck at a plateau because what ends up happening is they downregulate the thyroid and leptin hormones, and they've desensitized their cells to insulin. And so when you start bringing carbs back into your plan, you tank cortisol. And all of a sudden you're sleeping better, because when cortisol is in the basement, your body releases more melatonin and serotonin. So this is why I always say when I'm done fasting, even on a low carb deplete day, what I call a deplete day, this is where protein's sky high, veggies are through the roof, fats are higher, and there's carbs are in the basement completely. But whenever I break my fast on those days, I throw in a piece of fruit because I want to blunt the cortisol. Because during the fast, you're kicking up your sympathetic nervous system. Again, it's a stressor, just like sugar fasting. When you kick up the sympathetic nervous system, you're going to release more of those stress hormones I talked about, adrenaline, glucagon, and cortisol. Well, the thing that's going to blunt those after the fast is glucose from carbs. And so that's probably what you're experiencing, Frank, is that you just got cortisol balanced and bam, you started sleeping better. Now, other people have had the opposite problem, and it's because probably they were in a different spot hormonally than you were when they started the plan. So this goes back to, again, the best thing is adherence. And what is your actual starting point? That's going to determine how you actually react to this. Some people can jump right in and just go right at it. Other people are like 3 or 4 days in, like, life sucks, my gut hurts, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, their microbiome adjusts and they're fine. That's what happened to my wife. She was bloated for like 3 days and she's been fine ever since. She's down like 9 pounds doing this protocol. But that is the third mechanism. So you had that first one, which is FGF21. The second one is T4 to T3, more thyroid hormones. And that third one is ATP production, or the uncoupling of the mitochondria. Hopefully that covers the basis.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And to set a little bit of context for the listener, and then maybe we can dive into it, because I think very few people are going to have a starting point where maybe you and I are, right? So I was about 237, probably hovering around 10, 11%. I mean, I had visible abs, very, very vascular. I was eating a bodybuilder-esque type of diet, about 450, 470 carbs per day. Protein was right around 250, and then my fats were around 90. And I'd been kind of in that. It was almost a maintenance period. Like, I wasn't growing with that much food, but I wanted to see what would happen. And I had a cruise that I was going on. I was like, I see people are losing a lot of fat. Like, I got a short window here. Let me see what can happen. And I went from 237 to 229 in 7 days. And it was like peeled. Like, I'd never experienced anything in my 20 years in the health and fitness space, the way my body responded to it. But that was my starting point. To the guy out there that's maybe carrying 20, 25 pounds of extra body weight, how can he use this? What should his approach be? And what should some of the things that he should be looking to expect if he wanted to jump into sugar fasting, sugar diet?
Well, the first thing is always, expectations are everything, right? So the first thing that's always required with any type of protocol is a little bit of freaking patience, right? Because it's not going to just like start happening for you overnight. And again, even we could take 3 of the same guy that you just described, and all of them could respond differently, Frank. But at the end of the day, you should feel more energetic. You should definitely see your sleep quality go up, especially if you manipulate carbs like most people do and keep them low. And you should feel better pumps in the gym. Ever since I started sugar fasting, I'm completely off of pre-workout supplements now. I do creatine. I do like 5 grams of creatine, like almost every day, maybe every other day here and there. I'm not that great of a responder off creatine. I do more for the brain benefits now. But with that being said, everybody will respond differently, but there's no doubt the commonality should be higher energy, better focus clarity, better pumps in the gym, because you're going to fill up your glycogen tank. It's going to be completely full, right? And so this is what happens when people do carnivore and keto and they add carbs back into their diet. We could talk more about that. But as far as other changes go, I think it's just a matter of everybody's guts in a different spot. And this is the one thing I've noticed. I had a couple of videos that took off on YouTube talking about sugar fasting, really took off. So I was able to comb through the dumpster fire of comments and actually find some really good ones. And finding people talk about, I'm experienced like us, but my gut hurt. And then other people come in, I'm experienced like you. I love this. I'm experienced like you. I hate this. I can't do it. So it just goes back to just any type of protocol whatsoever you're talking about. 50% of this stuff's going to be between our ears. Like, what are we believing to happen? That's another conversation. That's another podcast, right? Right. But it is the truth. And at the end of the day, where are you starting out body composition wise isn't as powerful as where you're starting out with your belief system, your BS, right? And so I think that's a starting point as well. If you're going into this doubtful and skeptical and looking for something bad to happen, what you focus on expands, vice versa. Going into this excited, think it's going to work great. Chances are it's probably gonna. It's not a blanket statement that that's going to happen, but that is 50% of it. And I think you would agree with me if we look at science.